So today I want to talk a little bit about what is professional and technical communication. I realize that this class is called business writing, and on the whole, some of these terminology, business writing, professional communication, technical communication, are situated within disciplines. So sometimes business writing is taught in communication departments. Sometimes it's taught in actual professional or technical communication department. Sometimes it's taught in actually the business school, and sometimes it's taught in English departments. So the approach to the class might be a little bit different because it's housed in an English department than if it was housed in a business college. So the actual terms are helpful to parse out. So first of all, professional communication, which I would say is pretty synonymous with business communication, is communication done by any professional worker. You could be an engineer and need professional communication skills. You could also be somebody who works specifically in communication and use professional communication skills. But on the whole, somebody who does professional communication doesn't have to be somebody whose sole job is writing. And this is why I think you guys are required to take this class, is because all writers need, or all workers in professional business environments need to understand how to communicate in their workplace. So when we think about what types of professional communication is delivered in the workplace, which are sometimes called deliverables, we think about things like internal memos and policies. Even if your job is to say you're like the shipping manager at a place, right? You'll probably be writing policies for the company, standard operating procedures and policies. You might write a press release. So say, for example, your job involves, maybe you work in human resources and something went wrong at your company in terms of human resources, and you need to help draft a press release from a human resources standpoint. Marketing for relevant publics. Maybe you work for human resources and you're trying to market the sign up for actual health insurance to the workplace, the rest of the workplace. Maybe you are working in marketing, right? And so you are putting together ads and ad campaigns and social media campaigns. Professional workers put together reports. So a sales report, if you work in sales, right? And your boss asks you to put together a sales report, you'll put together a report that shows your sales and where you've missed sales and where you have opportunity for sales. They'll probably include some spreadsheets, but probably also some written work. Social media, you might, your job as a professional worker might be kind of a jack of all trades. So you might be managing human resources, but then also managing the company's social media. And why we take this class is that as professional workers, there are some considerations that come into play in creating communication and communication practices and deliverables for your workplace. So we develop contextually relevant deliverables that communicate both within and without the workplace. So that's what we're going to get a lot of in here. What are some of the considerations? Like, for example, when putting together a report, what should the document look like, right? That's the kind of stuff that we think about. Are you thinking about putting it on company letterhead? what kind of graphs, what should your evidence looks like? What should you use? Graphs? Should you use tables? Should you use pie charts? What kind of information is necessary for the audience that you're coming up with? If you're developing policies, is there sort of a company a company Bible, if you will, in terms of sort of a standardization of the type of font they use, the type of communication practice. So the design of the document becomes really important in professional workplaces. And so, you might ask, well, where are professional workplaces? They could be governments, they could be hospitals, they could be businesses, they could be corporations, they could be universities. So there's really et cetera. So there's other things too that's not even within there, but that's really a wide range of things. So anyone who considers themselves a professional employee, a professional worker, should probably also think about what type of writing they do in the workplace. A more specific job or role within sort of the business writing is technical communication. Technical writers are normally people hired specifically to do writing work, although, like we talked about before, you could also be doing technical writing, but also be the engineer, right? So people hired to do specific writing work dealing with technology. And I put technology in quotation marks because we're thinking about not just web technology, but also, low-tech technology. So the image that you have here is an image of a label of a t-shirt, right? A technical writer might be hired to, or part of their job at this company might be hired to decide what goes on this shirt, okay? How to design this label. What does this label communicate to the audience? Of course, we know that it communicates size, it has the company's logo, it communicates how to wash things, but what do these logos mean? It communicates here that it was made, where it was made, and then, right, this is really funny. So this design has really funny. This t-shirt is actually made of 100% pure white unicorn tail hair, but since unicorns are rare, we kept it secret. It's got the company's website. So a technical communicator might design and write this t-shirt label, and that we could call a technology. Other things that they might put together are instructions and manuals, which again, if you're an engineer and you are part of a team that puts together a manual, your job is as the engineer, but then you also might be doing kind of double duty as a technical communicator. You might work in a company that hires a technical communicator to interview and do research on specific with the engineers to help put together a manual. So it will be your job to write the thing, but you will be taking what goes into the manual from your research on the product and within the company. So sometimes technical writers or technical communicators have area expertise. So for example, a technical communicator working in NASA might have a background in space technology. They might ask for somebody who might have a degree in that area, but also a talent in writing. Or it might be somebody who has a degree in technical writing, but has an affinity and knowledge base in space technology, right? So technical communicators also do social media. They don't always, but one pretty popular job nowadays is to be someone's social media editor for a company, or a social media content creator. And it's where that person, you know, understands the organizational context and the message coming out of the company, or what the company stands for, what their ethics are, and they communicate on social media for that company. So they manage the Twitter and the Facebook and the Instagram, and the technical communicator knows the difference between those three different social medias and is able to post content in those different places. Technical communicators do research. Sometimes it's putting together a report. Sometimes, or not even sometimes, always, the research informs the writing. So like we talked about with the instruction manuals, the same thing with the social media. If your job is to put a social media campaign together for the company, to increase sales, some of the research that goes into creating that might be what increases sales, understanding the market, and then understanding how you can capitalize on things that are already going on the internet or within the company to help boost communications, which boost sales, right? So you're thinking about, how do we get people to look at our social media? And then web content. So that's another job, is a content specialist, is somebody who helps create and write and craft content that gets seen on the internet. Why? Technical communicators are really big into ethics and context. Their job is to communicate a product's intended use, or a company's persona, to prevent mishandling and promote ethical distribution. So the technical communicators might be interfacing with the legal team pretty frequently. So for example, like, what goes into this label, right? They might need a consultation, or it might needed a further review from the legal team. Technical communicators are in virtually all workplaces. We here in the English department employ somebody who does basically all of this work for the department, to promote the department, promote the faculty in the department, to design documents within the department, to manage the social media for the department, to create web content for the department. And so, so there are a lot of different layers of professional and technical communication, and our job this semester is kind of to look at what goes into both creating and analyzing professional and technical communication. One layer might be an economic layer. It might be looking at, the cost benefit of communicating in a certain way, or it might be looking at the economics behind communicating in this way. It could be the economic stuff with the publics that you're communicating to. There's an
It's 1:00.
There's an institutional context to professional and technical communication. At ASU, people working at Arizona State University have to understand what the institutional context of their communications are. So it could be within a department. It could be within the actual college. So before we can speak, what does this look like? An educational layer, right? This could have to do with the educational level of your public. This could have to do with, is your document doing something educational? Is it ethical, right? So one of the biggest, we could think about that. Ethical and legal kind of go together. So thinking about, right, what are the laws? What are the limits? How do we communicate that to a public without stepping over boundaries? And the ethics. So, for example, we might think about something along the lines that's really, really simple, of creating like the Hydro Flask water bottle. So it's a water bottle, right? We all have water bottles, or I would imagine a lot of you have used a water bottle, one of the reusable ones. And one of the things I always think about when I use them is it's really nice to be able to put them in the dishwasher to sanitize them. Well, one of the most popular ones out now is the Hydro Flask. It was designed because of its vacuum seal inner that keeps everything super cold. It was designed to not go in the dishwasher. As a technical communicator, it would be my job to make sure it's labeled correctly and shown not to go in the dishwasher. But I also would, at that point, ethically look at the design team and say, hey, water bottles get really gross and disgusting and all that. Are we sure we can't design it in a way that it's dishwasher safe? And they might say, no way. Okay, that's fine. There's a cultural dimension of technical communication. So depending on maybe it's a public that you're trying to outreach. Maybe there is the communication practices are different with different cultures. So this might have to do with crossing national boundaries. So communicating to a Japanese public, your company wants to enter into a new market. But what are so being able to understand how your product or your company can market to that public without either culturally appropriating that culture or without like just stepping on the toes of that culture. So Japanese culture and American culture communicate differently. And so part of the layer of understanding that communication between to enter into that market or even employing, putting together a satellite office in Japan would be how do those two cultures talk to each other? It could be demographics. So understanding age and gender and things like that. What does that go into? Marketing a product or communicating in terms of maybe even writing a manual, right? So if you're in a workplace that has two large demographics, maybe they have baby boomers and millennials, and the two happen to not speak to each other that well because the age difference tends to be a barrier. If the millennial technical writers are writing a manual that the baby boomers have to follow, right? Maybe there's just a divide in the company in terms of job. Like that's something to take into account. Social, political. Some people do political communication, so understanding and thinking about questions of politics when doing that. Or even companies now have had to think about that. We live in a polarizing political time. So where do companies want to communicate to publics on this? And not, as a product or a company, that's something that they've all been thinking about. Nationally, I think we get there with cultural layers of a technical communication product, and then transnationally. So products or companies that work in many different countries, how are they able to communicate clearly and ethically and use context well to whether it's a workplace or whether it's a product, how do they get everyone on the same page? And so as we're thinking, this is a really long list, but as we're thinking about things through the semester, different technical communication and professional communication products and situations, I want us to come back to this list and understand that they all have these different dimensions to them. Some are more prominent than others, and most of the time these dimensions for a good technical or professional communication product have been thought out by the technical or professional communicator so that they're not they're not stepping on toes, or they're not insensitive, or they're actually reaching the public in a way. So it's not just, technical communication isn't just like a PR thing and, being PC. It's also about reaching a customer, or reaching, communicating within the workplace. So there's a really famous article on the Challenger explosion and how that was a technical communication problem, is that some of the writers kind of figured out that this could happen, and they had a hard time with the engineers explaining each other. And, again, I would definitely look it up. You could Google communication and Challenger explosion. It kind of shows beyond just, there's a lot of different layers here. So this course is housed in rhetoric because there's a connection to rhetoric here. We teach you to do technical and professional communication that is rhetorically based, is that you should have rhetorical awareness in the deliverables that you create for your workplace. So you may have taken English 101 and 102. The awareness of audience and context are hugely important here in English 302. Because your audience, it might be your boss, it might be the people in your workplace, it might be the public, it might be consumers, it might be customer bases on Twitter, it might be customer bases on Facebook. There's a lot of different scenarios. And then the context, right? So understanding the context of your workplace. If you've ever had a workplace disagreement, sometimes this happens maybe it's with your boss. You're not representing the company well. Maybe your boss says that. My husband just had a situation at his workplace like this, is that they were having a communication problem because he works remotely, and his company is in California, and he works for a builder, or he works in the building industry. His company in California building practices are very different than Arizona building practices. And neither my husband nor his boss took time to understand the differences. And so they had a huge communication problem because neither understood the context of this stuff. So the standard operating procedures from the company in California didn't work for Arizona, but my husband wasn't able to communicate that to his boss because he didn't understand that the standard operating procedures actually worked for California. And so what they're doing as a result of understanding this communication problem is they are developing new standard operating procedures that have the company and its integrity in mind, but then are all locally specific to Arizona. And so understanding, right, context is huge. Understanding the ethos of the speaker, right, you, or the ethos of your company. Being able to craft a message that is consistent, that logos, a consistent message across different social media platforms. Pathos, understanding where we move emotionally the audience, if at all. If you're writing an instruction manual, it might not be at all. But then also one of the ideas I want to introduce here is users. A lot of technical communication nowadays is starting to think about where users fit in, especially if we're thinking about different technologies. And that's going to have to do with your first product, is how are users considered and represented and taken into account on a company's website. And so user research and understanding user experience and capitalizing on user experience is huge in technical communication now. So keeping that in mind. Finally, I wanted to look at a technical writer, technical communicator job with you real quick. So this is one for Nintendo. it asks you, and they're writing copy, so writing on websites and stuff. So here's what the description of the duties are. Conceptualizes and writes all copy, provides wireframe and architecture direction for email marketing and other communication channels. So literally like helping the company understand how we do email marketing and how we communicate. Not just writing it, but like when do we send out the email blasts? What should they include? Writes meta tags and SEO copy for websites. So SEO is it's optimization, so it allows your website to end up it uses keywords to allow your website to end up on higher web searches. A lot of people are really into that right now. Proofreads stuff, maintains cross-departmental communication, and write current copy for news sections and flagship website. So like keeping up with the company is this writer's job. You can't just sit off into a cubicle and write divorced from the company, right? So if there's an issue with the Switch, or there's an advancement with the Switch, or a new game, like your job is to not just write, but to keep up with the company. Conceptualized and writes copy for all of these different things. So it's not just you're given a direction. Sometimes you have to come up with the content on your own. Writes additional department copy. So they might come to you and be like, hey, we need a writer to write this. And may represent Nintendo as a official corporate spokesperson. This could be television. This could be at conferences, etc. And so these are the examples. So, and I think this is a pretty standard writerly job. So it's not just you can have really amazing, you're an amazing writer. It's that there's a lot of planning and processing and research and thought and design that goes into your writing. And so that's the kind of stuff we're thinking about this semester. If you don't want to be a professional or technical writer as your job, that's totally fine. Remember that you're taking this class to understand writing in the workplace and how you can be more rhetorically aware with that writing and why that is pertinent. So we're not just here to, proofread stuff and make sure your business memo format is perfect and make sure your report format is perfect and make sure you have your resume looks okay. We're also thinking about, what are the ethics and what are the context behind that, and how do you write documents that are ethically sound for your company, or at least ethically considered, but then also contextually relevant. Okay. So that's what I have for today. Thank you.